All right, super excited for our next episode here on Clazar podcast. We have a very special guest, someone that I've known for the past couple of years, and I must say, a noted engineering veteran in the industry. So, yo, so happy to have you on board. And why don't you give your intro for our audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me. We've been playing calendar tag too long, so it's great to be here. My name is Suyog. I'm the head of engineering for Metronome. Metronome is a billing as a service software. Our mission is to operationalize and accelerate all of software's revenue. So the way we think about it, billing is at the heart of every SaaS company. And as one of the things that people always forget is not just important to build a product, but a huge part is actually pricing it, right? And then kind of taking it to market, which is, I know we're going to talk a lot about it. And billing plays a huge role in it. So Metronome builds a platform, a software that allows you to build usage-based billing models and take your product to market and actually invoice and bill your customers. So we're doing this so you don't have to write your software yourself. I did this myself back in Elastic. I'm happy to talk about that. We've seen a lot of traction in the last year. We recently raised a 43 million Series B from NEA. We have been working with companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Databricks. So it's been a lot of fun times working with those fast-moving companies and being lockstep with them.
Fantastic, fantastic. And again, congratulations on the funding round. I just saw that
Thank you.
announcement come through the other day. Super excited for both you and Kevin as well. So let's maybe dive just a little bit deeper onto your background and on the billing space. Like I know you did a bunch of work in the space at Elastic as well. So why don't you tell us what that world was like, and also specifically why is this usage-based billing or UBB as we call it? Why is this thing hard? And tell us the people about it.
Yeah, I spent about 8 years at Elastic. I joined pretty early, and I saw a lot of transformation of the company. We started as a open source software, and then we went self-managed subscription-based software, which included things like support and like professional services. And then we became a multi-product company. We went all in into cloud, like every kind of company that started in 2010s, that era, realized that cloud is the future. So we hard pivoted to that. And this is the kind of transformation that it was extremely important in Elastic's history. And I got a chance to be kind of front row seats into this because I was leading the cloud, one of the cloud platform teams, and a part of my team was tasked to build the billing software because it was 2017. We looked around. There was not a lot of out of the box like enterprise ready billing software that was available, and we said we're going to just build it. And lots of peer companies like Mongo, Confluent, they all built these things in house. So it was great just kind of getting exposed to not just the technical aspects of building something like this, but also the entire go to market because the way I describe billing is usage-based billing specifically is like it's like an octopus, right? So it's got lots of tentacles and different parts of the organization, and that's what makes it hard. So I can get deeper into that, but I think one of the things I'd like to clarify is that a lot of people don't know usage-based billing, even though they've used Amazon, they've used like lots of infra providers. It's really hard to, you won't see it until you actually pay attention to it in many ways because you get an invoice and you just pay it, right? And sometimes it just happens that. The analogy that I've used is think of it as like, your the billing, the world has been mostly subscription, right? So there was subscription, recurring fee that you pay every month or every year, and usage-based billing is kind of opposite to that. There's no recurring revenue or recurring subscription. You pay for what you use, right? So if you consume more S3 from Amazon, you pay just for that, right? Another good analogy is like Netflix. So you pay like whatever $13 a month to Netflix. I hardly watch Netflix. I still pay like $14 every month. So
That's
imagine
not
that.
usage. That's not usage based.
No, it's not usage, right? That's subscription based.
Subscription. Yeah.
So that's kind of why the heart of it is that as a consumer, I would love to pay only for the value that I get, right? I would love to see movies, a few movies here and there. I'll pay for like, just those movies. So that is the key difference, right? So you pay for what you want to use, and the value you get is the most critical part of it, right? So instead of just paying a flat fee, $15 every month. So that's usage-based billing. So imagine if Netflix went to like per movies or per kind of a number of hours of movies you saw. Um, so yeah, so this is critical, or this is um, transformational, because like companies like Elastic and Confluent, which you've been through, there are a lot of infra companies that build on top of like AWS, GCP, and Azure, and then they have like infrastructure costs that Elastic buys infrastructure from these clouds, and you have to somehow price your offering based on like keeping in mind the infrastructure, right? So at the end of the day, we all should care about margins. We all should care about the infrastructure costs, and then you have to tie the value of our product both with the actual cost that you have to produce that software, but also how your consumer sees it and how they actually use it, right? So that's kind of why usage-based billing is really popular these days. Um, it's hard because, as I said, it's there's a few components to it. One is it's not as straightforward as subscription billing, because for recurring monthly billing, you just have to, at the end of the month or whatever your billing period is, you have like a cron job or something that just repeatedly schedules and charges your customer. Um, in usage-based billing, you have to constantly get the actual consumption data. So we'll go back to the Netflix example. You actually, if Netflix were to be a usage-based model, you have to get the number of hours of movies you've seen and the type of movies, and how long you've stopped and paused. Like you have to take all those metrics, measure it, and then send it, and you then have to kind of aggregate it, towards the end of the month, then kind of join the pricing information with it, right? So there's the actual usage, and then there's a pricing, and then you join them, you aggregate them, and then you apply discounts and all kinds of like contractual obligations that you have. Then you send the invoice to the customer, right? So this is a very different world than subscription, which is pretty straightforward in my opinion. So that's one part of it. So in many ways, it's actually a data platform where you're constantly getting high volume data, which is product metrics, how your customers use your um, software, and then you also have to join that with lots of the contractual information that you have about your customer. That's what makes it harder. The second part is, as cloud go to market has evolved into usage based billing, every single stakeholder needs to have the data that you have, right? So that's like it's not just important to get the invoice data. You have to kind of get like more granular data, and that's hard. That's hard to do and hard to democratize. So that's usually like, that's why it's also a core data problem. And the third part is kind of going back to the octopus analogy, like your finance team wants to see your revenue, whether you're going to make the end of month target. Your sales operations team wants to see how your sellers are getting compensated, right? So there's sometimes the compensation model is based on the consumption of your software, which is great, because there's a constant like value cycle that you form. And then your engineering team needs to build it, integrate it. They need to get that metrics information from your software, and then your product management team, they're the ones changing prices, experimenting with it, introducing new prices. Then there's like analytics team, you got all this data, incorporating this to the rest of the processes, revenue recognition. There's so many of these different parts, like different functions of the company that plays a pivotal role here. And that's kind of why it's hard to build. And the Metronome's kind of thesis is that we'll do it for you because you don't have to do this, right? This is You can integrate with us. You can get all of these functionalities out of the box with us, and we'll also kind of like plug and play with your stack and integrate with like your code to cash, like Salesforce, all the way into NetSuite. So that's kind of why Metronome has been successful in the last couple of years.
That is fantastic. And when you think about the different pieces and different components, right? Like you talked about, so you actually touched on many aspects there. One is the GTM side of the aspect a little bit, where the finance teams needs information and all of that. But being an engineering leader, so like what I'm very interested in knowing and understanding is, let's say there's a company out there today, they may or may not be usage based, they may be considering going usage based.
Yeah.
From an engineering standpoint, could you help them understand if this, like, how should they go about it? Should they consider a solution like Metronome on day one? Should they hand roll something and then wait for that critical inflection point, whatever that is, and then going, like, how would you guide them along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like about 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, the usage-based billing, the software that powers the usage-based billing, was very proprietary, right? Like it was a secret sauce. Like when Snowflake did it, they were the kind of poster child of like consumption-based billing. AWS did it, and Snowflake kind of followed and built on top of it. And then we had all the companies like Confluent, Mongo, Elastic do it. Um, which was great because it was a moat in some sense to have this pricing model, and then powering that pricing model required you to build like custom logic and all of the stuff. um, and now, like fast forward, like 2024, I feel like this software has become commoditized because every single infrastructure SaaS company is doing usage based, right? The AI companies are doing usage based. They charge based on number of APIs you use. So I'd say, given where we are right now, the software has evolved, and it's not that you have to build all this yourself. You focus on what you want to do for your company. What's your company's mission? To build the best database, to build the best analytics software, or like the best AI solution, chatbot. Um, don't worry about billing, because that's something that you can outsource, and you can then focus a lot on what you want to build. And this is what we've seen in the last 2 years. Again, the economic environment has helped a little bit here in that um, every company is running lean. Engineers are very like sacred resource right now. It's not like 2016 where we were over hiring a lot. So I think, do you want your engineers to be deployed on running a billing, or like creating a billing engine, or do you want them to be building the best database in the world, right? So that's the way I think about it. So in a short answer is like, I think if you know that you want to go into usage based billing, you should just buy software that does it. And it's matured a long way, and as I said, it's become more commoditized.
Yeah, and as a former, person who's led billing teams, I
Yeah,
would definitely,
you have the battle scars.
definitely,
Yeah.
yeah, battle scars for sure, and I totally align with you on the fact for sure. Okay, now continuing on our engineering theme, right? Like we engineers have this tendency of, like you talked about build versus buy. We don't like to build anything. Sorry, we don't want to like buy anything.
Yeah.
We just wanna go and build stuff, right?
Yeah.
So as an engineering leader, let's say if you were on the other side and Metronome was trying to sell into an engineering leader, but that engineering leader is he or she wants to build it themselves, because of course there's some things that platform can't provide, and there's the customizations, all that. What would you tell them when they're considering this decision?
Yeah, I've been part of a lot of the sales cycles here in Metronome, so we've seen this argument of like, hey, we're going to build it because it's not usually it's a cultural thing of building, right? So there's obviously that. Our approach is that we provide examples of how companies have tried to build it, and I come from a very personal background of like Elastic building it, and it's like, we have the best engineers. How hard could it be to build something like this? And then it turns out that it is not. It's pretty hard, and you have to constantly kind of put fuel into this fire, right? So, so yeah, I think a lot of this is just like referenceable customers, and in some ways, like if you really want to build it, we actually don't mind telling you how to build it in Metronome. Like that's where like if you want to start, let's say try it out, right? Like try it out. Most companies will try to build this, and then they realize that this is not feasible to maintain as they scale. And especially there's like conflicting voices in the room. Product managers want quick product releases, pricing changes, and the engineering team is like, we can build this. How hard is it to build this? And then finance team is like, okay, can you build a revenue forecasting model for us or RevRec? And then engineers are like, what is RevRec, right? What are you what are you talking about? So those kind of things, like we make them aware of all the different like the tentacles, all the tentacles that the billing engine has, and then
Mm,
that is a very clarifying moment where like, oh wow, this is not a straightforward piece of software. It requires a lot of attention and care, and usually that's a good inflection point. And sometimes you just go and build it and then come back, which is also great.
got it. Got it. Okay. Okay, so that was fantastic, Suyog. The Now let's switch gears into from the your billing world to a little bit more around how we you also work in the cloud marketplaces world before. I remember that's how we got initially connected when we had the conversation,
Yeah,
cafe in Mountain View, and these two worlds are quite related in many ways. Like AWS, Azure, GCP marketplaces have their own metering component
yeah.
which is gels really well with what the usage based billing providers such as Metronome are doing. In your experience in the past, like how has your engagement been? Is there anything that you can share based on your experience in terms of how it can be helpful for specifically on the billing side of the equation?
Yeah, I mean, take cloud go to market as a whole, right? So there's lots of different components to it. Like there's multi-channel ways of selling your product. One is direct. You go to your website, you go call a salesperson, you sell your software, and then there's pay as you go. You don't want to commit to a longer term commitment, but then you're
Mm-hmm.
using the software monthly, right? So that's another uh, model. And then the third one is the cloud marketplaces where you're using AWS, GCP, Amazon, Azure, and you could buy software through them, right? So these are the three main kind of channels, and I was exposed to all of this while working at Elastic. And the interesting thing was, as an engineer, and I had no idea these worlds existed, right? So I was like oblivious to all of this. I was like, uh, you know, let someone else sell the software. I'm gonna build it, and all I care about is the revenue increasing, right? So that was the mindset I was in, and then like my boss said like, hey, there's a project where we have to transform to consumption base, and then marketplace is one of that, and all this stuff. I kind of like kicked and screamed my way to it. I was like, I don't want to do this project. It doesn't feel like it's interesting, and I was wrong, right? I mean, this whole like I like the amount of uh, uh, there's so much happening in this area, and engineering plays a huge role in this because you're primarily, I think there's two things that's happened, right? One is um, the growth of data warehouses.
Mm,
Like data is the king, right? So you like usage based billing and cloud marketplace, pretty much all of these things. You get a lot of data of how people consume your product, and that's just not enough, right? Then you have all your other sales data and all your financial data, and then like how do you acquire customers? How do they even hear about you? And data warehouse is kind of where this all comes together, right? So you have all this information here, and I think in many companies, data warehouses are owned by engineering or owned by
mm,
started by engineering and then eventually goes to IT and analytics teams and so on. But
mm,
anyhow, so I think this whole like the word of like how all these cloud go to market, I think primarily to me is the change has been like this being very data based, right? So it's all about data. It's like because it's high volume sales, and it's very different than like selling to on premise, because you don't have metrics, right? You don't phone home all this information. It's really hard to get that kind of like how are you using the product. And in cloud, like you have uh, with privacy included, of course, like how in an anonymized way how you actually using the product. That's important for like everyone from product to finance to like people who want to understand marketing targets, like how do they acquire the customer. So I think just getting exposed to this world was like fascinating, right? Like you just
Mm.
don't seem to feel like there's a lot going on here. And then as a engineer, when I got exposed to that, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is like I can't believe that the data here is so critical to the revenue of the company and like how we report back to Wall Street, etc. So anyway, back to the cloud marketplaces. The thing I also didn't realize is that companies spend like millions and millions of dollars on like cloud providers, right? Like Airbnb famously had like in their S1 like a huge bill on AWS or like
Yep.
cloud providers, right? So that commitment is amazing because you can not only use it for like native apps in cloud in that cloud, but you can also buy software through that marketplace. And the frictionless approach is huge, right? So you want your consumers to not spend too much time provisioning the software, and you want them to make it easier to send the data and send the usage back. So, and this is kind of where when we built out our marketplace offering, we work very closely with AWS, GCP, and Azure,
Mm.
and it was just fascinating to see like our graph kind of like hockey stick of like how cloud marketplaces. It was amazing. At some point, it was like we were like, is it gonna eclipse our like direct sales motion here? So, and my bet is like, I think in like the next 10 years, I think cloud marketplaces is gonna be the primary way that people buy software. So I think kind of like from an engineering mindset, I think what I love is that we all use the cloud providers ourselves, building the product, and we know that how like it's so easy to gravitate to like you're using AWS, you just click a button and then you're gonna get another piece of software. You don't have to ask anybody. You don't have to get permission from a finance team, right? So all that stuff is so easy, and I think that is a mindset you need to bring to this integration. And it's been a huge transformational change in the whole the way people sell software.
Absolutely. And, I mean, I'm biased, but I do agree with your statement that, the next 10 years, majority of the software sale is going to be happening via
Yeah.
one of the three big marketplaces for sure. And you can see it happening in front of your eyes. Like you see, CrowdStrike mentioned that they've done $1 billion worth of revenue just via
Wow.
AWS marketplaces. There's a few other companies that have announced as well. And it's only going to be a norm. The first one's the always the hardest one, takes much more longer and it's harder,
Right.
but once the first one happens, it's just a matter of time that the others follow. So I'm
Right.
very excited about the future.
Yeah, and for the
um
consumer, the buying experience is super easy too, right? Like it's just you take away all the pain, and that's a huge thing. That's exactly what every product manager, every
yeah.
engineer wants is like access to your product super quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I have a founder friend. Funny story. I found a friend. He was looking for some software to buy for his
yeah,
startup. He went on the website of that company, and they had like this big long sales cycle, contact sales, all of
yeah,
that. He just like, hey, I just want to buy like one seat, very simple. Let me see how I can do it. He went on the AWS marketplace, and they had mentioned like a much more easier way to integrate. So in one click, he bought it, and he was done with it. So that's the future that he's like, okay, I had no idea that this is possible,
yeah. Pretty
and
powerful,
so
man. Yeah,
it's very very powerful. So in terms of the engineering and in terms of the integrations and stuff, like knowing what you know now, would you like in terms of like helping the audience understand, would you, if you had to do it all over again, would you invest your core engineering on the marketplace integrations, like one two three whatever, building the entire analytics, or would you say get help from the Clazars of the world, or the offload it to a vendor, build versus buy? Like what would your guidance be at this point in time?
yeah. I think very similar to usage-based billing. Again, I believe that like like 4 or 5 years ago, marketplaces are very exclusive.
Hmm.
Like you have to get opted in, and AWS and GCP Azure had very privileged relationship with some vendors, right? So
Hmm.
now, as there's a lot of co-selling, joint
Hmm.
go-to-market. motions of those companies. So I feel like again with these things that are happening, they've recognized too that like there's a very strong relationship between a vendor and the
Mm,
marketplace, and they want to make it easier to buy software through marketplace. And for the vendor, you don't want to spend all this time building the machinery to do that, right? Again, just like usage-based billing, uh, you have to think about all the different APIs across all the different like marketplaces. You have to deal with like all the private offer stuff, and if you're an enterprise company, you'll be doing private offers, and it's just like sounds easy, but the devil's in the details, right? When you get to it, it's a lot of work. And as I said, like, do you want to be building the best software that your company, like, what you're known for, or do you want to build the best marketplace, software that integrates with AWS? Like, what is the actual value add to your company? So yeah, I think just like that, I feel like it's really straightforward these days to pick vendors, and integrate your software. And I think we've seen this both from like Metronome. Like we see a lot of companies. And
mm,
what's amazing is the other thing is that previously you had to like, and when Elastic did marketplaces, we were pretty late in the maturity, right? So we were a
mm.
multi-product company, we were an IPO, we had lots of revenue already. Now I'm seeing like lots of like smaller companies and companies with like less than 5 million in revenue doing the multi-channel strategy, right? Like they're just like going all in on marketplaces and direct. So they want to do everything. And then the reason it's happening is because access to software like this, right? Where you can easily integrate, and you don't have to, because those companies don't have a lot of engineering bandwidth. And again, you don't want to be spending time running a platform that is not directly applicable to users. So yeah, that's been a good revelation for me, and like not just big companies but small companies also doing this multi-channel strategy, which is great.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, Suyog, like what we are seeing is exactly that. There's like we have on Clazar platform, we have big companies, small companies, all the combination. But what I'm seeing is consistently month over month or quarter over quarter, we are seeing the point at which companies consider marketplaces to be shifting closer and closer and earlier in the
Hmm.
game. Because if you think about what's happening in the world, like all the three big cloud providers are pushing this very strongly with lots of like resources behind it, help from their side in terms of GTM material, how to do your go to market with marketplaces, pumping a lot of like dollars as well in terms of the help that they can provide. So that the barrier to entry that used to be before, when basically you and I did it,
Yeah.
is no longer there. and
Yeah.
and there's lots of like ways for you to get started. And if you can, as a startup, like if you can go do that and it's cost effective for you, it's all about creating leverage for you as a founder.
Right.
So I mean,
Yeah.
in this day and age of the world, like it makes total sense for anyone to start on the marketplace. 100%
Totally.
agree.
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. Last and final question from me. Like you're in Metronome now. Like you are obviously in the midst of this shift that is happening towards usage based. Let's say fast forward 3, 5, 10 years from now, where do you see entire usage based billing moving? And if you can add a little bit of color from your experience in terms of how marketplaces may or may not play a role there, I think that would be useful to hear.
Yeah, I think one of our theses is that every software company obviously is going to be a SaaS company. Every SaaS
Mm,
company will have a component of usage-based billing in it, whether
mm,
they're fully, selling through usage-based models, or they have a combination of like seats and then they have usage. I think that is going to be uh, like that's going to be the future, right? So like there's who doesn't want to show value to their users, right? So going back to my Netflix example, like it may be that the people when they use software, they just don't like it's the more value they see, and they're able to pay more, right? I mean, that's just the central thesis of consumption based, is that it's kind of a flywheel. Like I like your product, I consume. If I consume more, I pay more, right? And then this is kind of like a flywheel thing that is that is what is sparking a lot of software sales now, and the value. So I think so. That's the yeah. What we feel is like it's going to be heavily usage based, and there can be components of like subscription plus usage based, and there will be like some hybrid models as well. But yeah, I think like even companies like fintech, and I think what's been awesome to see is like the AI companies adopting it. All right,
Mm,
so lots of AI companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and several others too, because it like again, if you think about AI companies, a huge component of their cost is like the GPUs, like the actual like infrastructure
yeah.
costs, right? So you have to somehow relate that spend that you're doing
Mm,
into how you price your product, right? So I think that correlation is we're going to see more of that, right? Like again, yeah. Anyway, so there's a company that does like support like chat based support, and they moved to usage.
mm,
They moved to usage because they were doing like per message or like per kind of help that they get. So you can see
mm,
how like people are being creative because I think there's like you can be subscription, but you can add a component. Slowly, you can add a component of usage on it if you're not fully ready to go, and then see how much change in value that your customers get, and then sometimes at some point you're going to go all in there. So that's kind of our thesis, and uh, yeah, once you start seeing usage based billing, you can't unsee it in many ways because
mm.
think about it like Uber, right? Like the start of your trip, right? That's when you start a marker, right? And then the stop, like when you get off the car, that's usage, right? I mean, that's kind of like how you get billed, and not because you have like a subscription with Uber, right? So there's a lot of these this kind of companies, like segments, industries that are going to start doing this kind of billing model, and I think um, with marketplaces, they're somewhat like very closely related to, right? So again, you pay AWS because you have a huge cloud spend, and you have a commitment there. AWS is all about usage based billing, and then you want your software to look and feel, and the procurement cycle to be as native as possible, and that's what, like, even if you like let's say even if you're like Elastic, who have like Elasticsearch is separate from OpenSearch. You want that you want to provide the consumer the option of being able to buy that through the marketplace, right? So and then like all the cloud providers are working very closely. When I was at Elastic, we were working on a very native integration with Azure, where like with their Kubernetes, like with their Kubernetes offering, you could like do one click, and then you could send data like the logs to Elastic directly, and that's amazing. Like you don't even know it's marketplace. It's like under the hood, that one click integration, that like the feel of a native application. I think that's the way the world's going to go, where like every software is going to be closely embedded or integrated into these cloud providers, and it's just better for everyone, right? Like you don't have to worry about like upfront costs, and the friction is pretty much non-existent there. So
Absolutely. And what you said is, struck a chord with me is like the entire usage based billing. We used to say that at, in my previous places where like
yeah,
usage based billing is the most ethical business model. Like
yeah,
you charge the customer based on the work that you have done. Of course, you take a margin on top of it. That's how the world works. But
yeah,
it's never like, there's the leap of faith doesn't have to be from either side. Like customers know exactly what they're going to pay, what they're going to get. They can dial it up, dial it down based
yes,
on their requirements. So it's just a very clean business model for founders and business owners to do for sure.
yeah, yeah.
So, yo, thank you so much for coming here and sharing your thoughts. This was fantastic, and I look forward to working with you for years to come.
All right, thanks, Trunal. It's been a pleasure having me here, and it's good luck with Clazar.
Thank you.